Thanks everyone for joining me. Usually I'd be in person and it'd be a lot more fun, but this might be really interesting. I always preface these sessions by saying I have a 140-pound dog downstairs who really likes to bark as soon as I get on any sort of Zoom call, and then 2 cats who become the friendliest cats in the world as soon as I get a Zoom call and try to pull out my earplugs. So please offer me some grace and patience, because I also have neighbors who have just decided to do their lawn. So it's an exciting time here in Atlanta right now. But I will be talking about preparing a strong personal session, or a statement rather. I really prefer this to be a dialogue. So please unmute yourselves, ask me questions. If you prefer to use the chat, you are more than welcome to do so, but I probably won't get to the chat until after the session unless Dalton sees a burning question that can just read out to me. But please just interrupt me and unmute yourself, so that's a lot easier for me. So I am the Director of Admissions and Recruitment for Emory University's Rollins School of Public Health. I'm an alumnus of the program. I've worked in the field of public health for well over a decade now. I've worked at the federal level, state and local governments, as well as clinical field, nonprofit, and private sector. And I've been a manager where I've been hiring people. So I've read CVs, cover letters, and now about 5 years of personal statements. So I was just telling Dalton, I'm really happy to do these sessions because it helps me in the long run when y'all provide a personal statement that is really helpful to me and talks about what you want to do. So we will dive right on in. And just let me know if you can't see my screen or anything like that. So when we're talking about personal statement, we'll be going through a few things. We'll be identifying your interests, talking about the research, talking about authenticity, really utilizing your resources, the really fun part where you actually write it, and then keeping it all in perspectives in the admission cycle. So first, we'll identify your interest. So for all intensive purposes, I'm going to be focusing on public health. So when I say public health, if you're not interested in public health, which maybe after this you will be, just swap it out for business, law, anything of that sort. So when you're writing your personal statement for graduate school, there are 3 main items you really want to answer. It's why public health, or why the sector you're interested in, why now, and why Rollins, or the school that you're interested in. So for public health, it's really interesting because we use public health, we name it as a discovery program. A lot of people don't come in and say, I really want to do public health. They kind of figure it out in a stumble and bumble along the way. For me, I was a double major in biochemistry and human services with a double minor in biochemistry and pre-medical concentration. So I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist, and that's what I wanted to do. All my internships were in there. It was not until I was a junior into senior year of college where I was working at Duke at the Children's Hospital on a perinatally infected HIV study. I just had done so much work on the peds oncology that I transferred over to adolescent HIV for a little time. And I was working on a transition program and talked about how I really liked that I was making an impact that I could take to different hospitals and essentially have a community or societal impact. I was telling the principal investigator that, and she goes, well, that's public health. And I was like, I don't know what that means. So I Googled public health. And I was like, what is this? This is exactly what I wanted to do. So that was when I first learned about the field of public health. I stumbled into it. It's a journey. Have you yourself identified a specific area of interest within public health? For me, I'm what's known as a generalist, which is nice for me because I went in thinking I liked everything, and people were like, you might settle into one spectrum or another. And for me, I became a generalist. what's known as a jack of all trades of public health. I've worked on the 2014 Ebola crisis as a epidemiologist. I was the lead evaluator for a CMS project. I was a policy analyst looking at the Affordable Care Act in Georgia. And in DC, I taught legislators on the Hill. I was a crisis intervention for the School of Public Health, and then created the behavioral intervention team for the Emory University. So I've kind of done a bunch of different roles. So it's okay if you don't have that specific niche interest yet. Just why do you want to go into it? What's lighting that fire in you? What about studying at, say, Rollins stands out as it relates to your research and practice agenda? So what we mean by that is when you're looking at graduate schools or professional schools, schools have a very different ideology from one another. You're going to get a fabulous education wherever you're going, but it's really figuring out what pedagogy, what ideology is right for you for the school. So there are about 3 different arenas for public health schools. There's a theory-based school, a practical-based school, and then a hybrid school. So Rollins is a hybrid school. Theory-based school is very much about research. You're understanding theories, you're going into research, it's research center. Practical base would be your community engagement. You're learning about how to create programs. You're working within the community and community members, working in the field a lot. And the hybrid would be you get both the worlds. You're learning about theory in the classroom, but also partnered with community organizations to work on, say, needs assessments, program evaluations, getting that tangible real world experience while you're in school. Look at the schools that you're interested in and ask about that pedagogy. Are you going to be putting your head down and doing research and get in, get out, or are you going to be asked to really expand beyond that? Both ways are great. It's just whatever your preference is. So when you think about all of this, also think about your future. Do you want to do field work? Do you want to do research? Do you want to sit behind a computer or be out in the field? You're really interested in data, or you want to implement the programs, or do you want to do health education? Everything's right. There's no wrong answer to what you want to do with your future. It's just sitting down and thinking about what you actually want to do. And again, please interrupt me by just unmuting yourself and shouting out any question you have. Moving on into the research. So once you kind of went through that self-discovery of why are you going to graduate school, why are you going now, and what about the school you really like, you need to do your research. So for the field itself, you need to look at the timely news and journal articles. So one thing that's always interesting is thinking about when you're interested in public health, emerging trends that are happening. Right now, the pandemic, it's going back and forth with the research of what's going on. So we expect you to stay up on what's happening, but if you write a personal statement right now based off of the current research, but then by the time it's submitted and we're reviewing it, the research has changed a little bit, students get worried that if they think we didn't think they did the research. We go back and say, like, okay, that's the current research at hand, but you do want to check the timely news. You want to look at journal articles. You want to think about what's going on, what sort of foundation is happening, what sort of politics are involved. If you're talking about like the Affordable Care Act, you want to make sure that it's applicable and you have the right implementations. You don't want to say a state expanded when it didn't expand, things like that. Let's see. Going on to the, yes.
I was going to ask, like, how much research should you do so that your whole personal statement isn't too much filled of you're looking out into the world and it's more about learning about you?
That's a great question. So the research really goes into say you're interested in maternal and child health, and that's why you're going into public health, and you talked about your journey and what you've done in undergraduate, and you really want to work with Dr. Jessica Sales at Rollins School of Public Health on this nuanced topic of maternal and child health because X, Y, and Z. With that portion, because X, Y, and Z, that would be the scientific research involved in it. So you talk about your entire journey, and then when you're talking about your research interest, you want to make sure that research interest aligns with like the current science that is out there. You don't want to just make up some research, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause like I didn't want, I guess, to go back, like say like you're just like I don't want it to feel like I'm just reading it just to put it in and get in. I
Yeah.
want it to be like I'm already doing that and it's like
Mm-hmm.
part of my natural
Yep.
trait.
And that's exactly how it should sound. So this would be more of if you have that current research, if you're writing an undergraduate thesis and you're putting that into your personal statement, or this is something that you're interested in, just expanding upon that. The other part of the research would be with the institution itself. What we talked about with that pedagogic approach, make sure you know if you're including that, what the approach really is, specific language about the school. So one example I use is that we have the Department of Behavioral, Social, and Health Education Sciences. Students who are interested in that program are also probably applying to Tulane's community health department. They have very similar skill sets that you'll learn, very different, very similar research topics. So it makes sense that you would apply to both programs. But if you write in your personal statement, I'm interested in the Department of Community Health at Emory University, I know that you just used the exact same personal statement and you just didn't change our department name, because there are some nuances, but not enough that I wouldn't think that you'd be applying to the school. So we are the Department of Behavioral, Social, and Health Education Sciences. That language is very specific. Think about if you're, say another word, you're really interested in the maternal and child health certificate. If you're writing about anything outside of a certificate program, like it's a minor, for Rollins School of Public Health, and I know you didn't do your research on what a certificate program is. Ours functioned like a minor, other places function like a non-degree seeking student. So it's little nuances like that that you really want to look at and the language used for the school. And then for the program itself as well, you want to really know what you're talking about. So if you're saying, I'm really interested in attending the Department of Epidemiology because I really want to get out into the field and implement programs and really be engaged with communities, that's not epidemiology. You would utilize the data of epidemiology to inform programs, but epidemiology is all about trend analysis, predictive analysis, looking at where a disease is going, how to stop it, really collecting that data. It's not the actual implementation of the program. So make sure you know what the outcome and impact of the program that you're applying to is. Any questions about that? I apologize, I keep touching my face because I have a piece of cat hair that I can't find. All right. So my favorite part, be authentic. So I will pause here because I have students all the time who, when I tell them the personal statement for me is the most important part of your application, I see the fear in their eyes already. I say that because this is the only time that you will talk to me as an admissions counselor. We don't offer interviews. A lot of graduate schools do not. So this is the only time I actually hear your voice. I read your resume, yes, but that's a bullet pointed version of you. I see your test scores. Those are just test scores. This personal statement is you. It's you on a piece of paper that you are writing, you are crafting, you are giving to me. So as soon as I start saying that, I see people thinking, okay, how can I stand out? How can I be that person that Brittney's going to remember when she reads it? When you're doing that, it already puts a completely different perspective on your personal statement. You're highlighting all of these achievements. You have a tone of voice that you might not realize is coming through as, I'm standing out, I'm better than these people, this is why you should choose me, as opposed to being authentic. What also happens is when you get into that initial headspace of trying to stand out, you might enter into imposter syndrome, and you might think, okay, like I don't have enough things to stand out, and now I'm really worried and they won't remember me and I'm not going to get in. And you start to spiral into imposter syndrome while you're writing your personal statement. And I hate that for you, because you do deserve to apply to a school of public health, or you do deserve to go to business school. The things that you are passionate about, that's what you deserve to pursue. So what we want from you is to be authentic. I want to see the journey. I want to see the fire. So by talking about your own lived experiences, you're setting yourself apart. Even if you have a classmate that took the same exact classes, that had the same exact test scores, that did the exact same internship for you, and on a piece of paper or resume, you look exactly the same, your perspective or how you lived through those experiences are completely different. And by vocalizing the way you went through it and being authentic on your personal statement, I can tell who you are, and you're standing out. You are an individual by being authentic. So I really encourage that, because the form, like I was president of this and did this and this and this and this, like I can read that on your resume. It's frankly boring to me, and I would rather understand why you're going into public health or pursuing the graduate education that you want. What's the fire inside of you? Why are you doing this? So I'll pause there because I get a little preachy and go back into counselor mode in that session. So any questions about that? Okay, cool. So as I said, you really want to personalize it, because most programs don't do interviews. So this is your voice. This is the time to talk to us and faculty and anyone reviewing your applications. Please, 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 and I know Dalton has probably said this as well, do not recount your resume. It's like, we have it. I literally see your resume first, and then when I switch over to the screen, it's your personal statement. I don't want to read it again. If I see like the timeline right there, I'm glazing right over it. And that's just the reality of it. I am reading over 2,000 personal statements at any given time. And that's not an exaggeration. It's really going through. And I love it. But if you're not being authentic with me, especially in a field of public health where you're going into being a change agent, it's just, it's not a waste of my time, but I just want you to really invest in yourself. And by not listening to the advice that people are giving you, by not recounting your resume, you're not investing in yourself. So please don't do that. Please be authentic and talk about your journey into it. So describing your journey. When did you first become interested in this? What drives you to be an agent of change? Sorry, my cat found a box. I'm sorry, y'all, the reality. What impact will you make? With thinking about the impact you'll make, people get really worried because they're like, I don't know, like that's why I'm going to graduate school, like, so you can teach me how to make an impact. What we mean by that is think about making an impact on campus. The school that you're going to will be your home for the next 2 years if you're going to the School of Public Health. Are you going to volunteer out in Atlanta? Are you going to pursue being in a student organization? Do you want to do faculty research? Do you want to be an RA, a TA? How are you going to get involved into our campus? And then in the field of public health, it would be something like, I really enjoy outbreaks. The coronavirus pandemic really got me interested in public health. I see that the Rollins School of Public Health has the outbreak and response team. I really want to be involved in that, and maybe eventually also working with the Georgia Public Health Association. Those are small impacts that you're making. That's what we mean. You can go in full on and say, I'm going to be the director of the CDC by the time I am 32. Go for it. I'm really excited for you. That if that's what you want, do it. Like, that is an impact, but please don't feel like you have to be like, I am going to change the transmission of guinea worm in this remote location by the time I graduate. Like, you don't need to know that. That's why you're going into a discovery profession and trying to figure it out. But think about the small impacts that you're going to make. Any questions?
I do have a question on the second bullet point when you were saying describe your journey.
Mm-hmm.
And mentioning being an agent of change. Like, are you suggesting that we go into why exactly we want, like, do we look into the research, like, what are the problems facing, and then go into how, like, you want to change? Like,
so the reason, what I mean by agent of change or change agent is specific to public health or any like human services, anything that you're doing community work, and it could be involved with business, medicine, things like that. But we utilize that phrase as a very public health term. So a change agent is someone who sees an issue and is like advocating for change, advocating for a societal impact. So let's see. Say Emory University has a bunch of undergraduate students that, as an undergraduate student myself, I saw everyone stressed out. We didn't have enough resources. We were trying to get appointments with counseling and psychological services, but so many people needed appointments and we weren't able to get them in, things like that. So I'm seeing all these things around me. I want to go into the field of public health and attend Rollins School of Public Health because I want to go to Emory and I want to take a needs assessment and change the way mental health and student stress is addressed on an undergraduate campus. I want to work for enhancing the resources, increasing funding or delineating funding in a different way, taking maybe from student activity fees, taking it from one arena and heightening it over to counseling and psychological services to hire another counselor. I want to create a behavioral intervention team where we can call a crisis line, things like that. So by change agent, I mean, you see an issue, how do you want to change it? How are you going to be that advocate? What's driving you to get into a field that would make a place healthier? Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Cool. Perfect. And thank you for bringing up that question. Okay, let's see. So common mistakes to avoid, and this is just a whole bunch of them that we see. I hope you don't have all of them in one cycle, but redundancy or oversimplicity. So redundancy, don't be redundant, don't say something over and over and over again in the same way. Oversimplicity would be like you are explaining to me what public health is. And you start with definition of public health is this, and then you keep telling me what public health is. Yeah, I know you're talking to like people who have dedicated their lives into that, or you're talking about like what a business model is. If you're not relating it to why that is something you want to go into, and you're just trying to define and fill up a space because you want to get that word count, that's kind of like irrelevant, and you're forgetting that you're talking to an admissions committee who has degrees in what you're applying for. So don't try to be oversimplistic in that. Arrogance, it's really difficult because there's a fine line between you need to tout yourself, but just don't be arrogant about it. I can't really think of a good example. Just don't be arrogant. Controversial or argumentative, just for the sake of it. So this is a really interesting one for public health because we are very much into very controversial topics, abortion rights, LGBT life, things like that are controversial in the landscape of, say, the US of the world. We, of course, if that's what you're interested in, that's what you talk about, but don't just come in about politics just to poke at something. Don't just lay something out there to get a reaction. It's just not the way to do it. This presentation used to be a lot easier to go through when I got to this point in time, because I'd be like, just don't say these things. But now it's kind of more difficult to navigate because there's a lot of politics going on. There's a lot of different issues that you can talk about, but just don't make those comments or statements that maybe your like 96-year-old grandma made on Facebook. Just don't include those in your personal statement unless it's something related to why you're going to be a change agent. It's something that you could always talk about. I'm sure Dalton could advise as well. And if you're applying to public health and you're like, I really want to talk about this, but I don't know if that's controversial in your eyes. If you're asking me that, it's probably not controversial in the eyes of public health. But if you're just like, I'm going to put this in there, like Rollins was funded by Coke money, like Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola is bad for you, and I'm going to do this, and I think it's wrong that Rollins is funded by Coca-Cola money. Like, okay, but like, why did you bring that up? Did you say that because you want to understand the mechanics behind why do sugary drinks make a profit, and why is it then funded into higher education, things like that? Or are you just saying it to have a blanket statement because you don't agree with something, but don't want to put in some sort of rationale why you want to change it? I feel like I get really bumbly when I get around to this topic. So please, if you want me to follow up on it, keep bumbling. Unmute yourself and keep asking about it. If not, I'm going to move forward because I think I see some nodding of like, yes, I understand this is what I should be doing. Okay, cool. Plagiarism, don't plagiarize. Just don't do it. You might think that we won't see it. We will. Just don't plagiarize. Humor and negativity. I really don't need a joke. Like, unless it's a really, really good joke, that you want to send me in an email because we know each other and you've graduated 5 years out, let's do that, but not in your personal statement. Negativity, just don't be overly negative. Again, for public health, you're going into a field that is wrought with a bunch of issues. So we want to make sure that you're prepared and resilient to be able to like be the agent of change, not Nancy negativity. So those are common mistakes to avoid. Honestly, I haven't seen a lot of these mistakes in the past 2 years or so, but just keep these details in mind. How am I on time? Okay, it's 5 o'clock right now, so I'm going to speed through these things really quickly. Resources, and this is kind of just self-explanatory. Use your resources, start early. I know we say this many times, but really start early because this is not something that you want to rush. This is very important. This is the first thing I look at on an application. So please don't rush this. And I know it takes a lot of time, but please don't rush it. Use your resources in terms of utilizing the internet to find what the school culture is, opportunities like student organizations, the language they use, current research that faculty is being done, things like that we've said. Things that I always find helpful is that you source 2 readers. I always suggest an expert in the field and a non-expert. So that would be someone who is familiar with the field of public health, and that could be the person that helps you with that language of public health, making sure you're not being oversimplistic in the term that you're using. And then a non-expert who can help you out with grammar, if they understand it, if it sounds like you. I also always ask both expert and non-expert to tell me the 3 personality traits that come through after they read the personal statement, and then you can see if that falls in line with the traits and ambitions that you want the admission committees to hear from you or see you as. And please don't ask your parents or someone very close to you to read these or to be the expert or non-expert. They're going to give you very biased feedback. So try to ask someone who might not know you as well, because you want to see what a panel of people who don't know you would think about the personal statement and think about what is coming across for you. Write and write again. So you are going to have your first draft. You are going to have your second draft. Between first and second draft, take a few weeks. Please step back from it. If you write your first draft and then write your second draft the next day, you're going to still hear it in the voice that you thought you were writing in. When you read a sentence and you hear it the way you want, and then you see it like 2 weeks later, you're like, oh my gosh, like that is not what I meant to say. I meant to, like, there's a weird word in there, but I kept reading it differently. After your second draft, you'll proofread it and then review it. We typically ask you to do the expert on your second draft or your final draft. It really depends on where you think you are. I always say second draft, so then you proof it. I never actually ask you to do it on the first draft, because that first draft is really for yourself, and then coming back to it on your second draft. And then holistic admissions, I talk about this for y'all to understand why we look at holistic admissions and why the personal statement is so important, and why just feeling like you need to stand out. There's a whole bunch of different factors onto what we're looking at on an admissions committee. So yes, we're looking at you for your academics, your test scores, your personal statement, your letters of recommendations, this kind of whole package of well-roundedness of an application. But what we are working within is the program itself. Are you right fit for program? Are you more an epidemiologist, or are you more of someone who would do really well in global work or in communities? So are you the right fit for the program? The size. We only have so many spaces in class. There are only so many seats. There are only so many people that we can take in to maintain the type of interactions we want you to have and experiences we want you to have between faculty and students. That ratio, we need to maintain that. So we have a cap on how many students we can accept because of the size of the classes. When you're looking at scholarships, the cohort really comes in. So for graduate schools, there's not a lot of scholarship support, but you are always competing against your cohort. So if you have a lot of people who are applying to school and has a lot of work experience, you might have a disadvantage if you are coming straight from undergrad. Those are things that you don't really know and we can't really predict. So I can't really advise on that. It just is there when we get the applications in. And then the number of applicants is something you're also working within for the constraints. So if an economy is doing really well, graduate school applications are really low because people get jobs, they want to work, they get a salary. But if the economy is not doing so well, people tend to apply to graduate school, and then we have a large amount of applicants. So you're competing among a larger pool of students. So think about that as well. There are a lot of different factors. That's not just we look at you and we like you and don't like you. If that were the case, that'd be a really awful profession to be in, and I don't want to be in a judgment profession. So please take into account the other avenues that we're looking at and constraints we have, like budget and things like that. So I always try to be very upfront about it's not just a yes, no kind of situation.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when is the best time to submit an application? Even if it's due in March, Like,
Mhm.
is there like, oh, submit it 2 weeks before and like you look better, you have like a better chance of being accepted, or can you just do it by the deadline and like it's fine?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can only talk from the perspective of my school, but I would please encourage you to ask that for other schools. So we have what's known as a priority deadline of January 5th. We will take all of those students who apply before that, and we won't review applications until January 5th. So the reason we do that is because before January 5th, and up until January 5th, those are Merit Scholar competitors. So anyone that applied before January 5th, you're considered for a Merit Scholarship. So we look at you as an entire cohort at that time. So you wouldn't get a decision from us until after that for financial scholarships and things like that. So for us, it doesn't really benefit you from the admission standpoint to apply before January 5th, just as long as you apply before the priority deadline. If you apply after the priority deadline, I'd say that's kind of an issue. We would think, unless you had a really good reason. So like last year, we had a ton of returned Peace Corps volunteers apply for graduate school in the spring. And the reason for that is because they all got detailed back to the US because their service was cut because of coronavirus. So that is a very legitimate reason why you're applying after the priority deadline. But if you're applying after a priority deadline, it typically signals to us that you may not have been interested or you didn't get into the first choice of something that you wanted to get into. And for your sake, you would have less of a chance for scholarships because you would get, you'd have to be looking at the reallocated funds, which are very slim in graduate school, and then departments close. So if we had stellar applicants from everyone before the priority deadline and we had reached our, like, say, 100 people for the BSHES department, we would have to close the department. And then even though you might be a great candidate, the department's closed. So we'd have to waitlist you. But something that I will say for, like, we have work study positions, which are called Rollins Earn-and-Learn positions. That is a first come, first serve program, and it's based off the date in which you complete your application and the date in which you complete your FAFSA. So it's not based off of any of the data outside of the dates. So that would be something that if you submitted your application early, you'd be competitive for, and you'd probably get a Rollins Earn-and-Learn award because of how early you applied. So it might not help your admissions, but it might help you after you admitted to the school.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer all sorts of them.
Do you maybe have a suggestion of where we could look at examples of personal statements that are good?
I have one that when I am sending my thank you note to y'all, I can attach for Dalton to send out to everyone.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
My only caution with that is don't look at that personal statement and try to mimic your personal statement off of theirs.
Yeah.
As said, authenticity is key to these. There is no real prescriptive way to write a personal statement.
Yep. And so Dalton knows too, I chose one that is very, very difficult for you to mimic this one because this person has very specific experiences that they had. So it's a good like structure, but there's no way that you could follow the same. I did this, I did this, I did this. But it's a really good structure, and I provide feedback on what I really liked about why they brought this up.
So as an admissions person for Rollins, I just had a quick question for you and as well. So I always suggest that students, they go and they reach out to the admissions folks, if they have those questions or maybe they can't find something specific on a website,
Mhm.
are you open to getting those questions from students? Do you like to see those questions as a thing in your head, like, hey, this person's really interested?
I do. I really like to see that. I was just talking with one of my colleagues that I really like when y'all reach out to us and have those types of questions. But the flip side of that is when y'all just reach out to, like, say me just to say hi. And sometimes I have applicants reach out to me and they're like, I just wanted to introduce myself. This is my resume. There's no question. There's nothing like that. So I'm kind of stuck and I'm like, I don't know. Do you want to reach out to me? Because by just reaching out and saying hi, it doesn't help you. If you have a follow-up or you want to learn more about the field, that's really helpful and it shows that you're engaged. But by just saying hi to me, it doesn't really show an engagement. And then in the field, we're getting so many different questions and applicants. And again, I love it so much. But I really, I'm up until like 3 a.m. answering emails from y'all. And sometimes I get sassy. I'm like, why didn't you just have a question about public health? Like, just include something in there. So I can be like, oh, great. Like, this is what I'm talking to. Because when I get just saying hi, I'm like, I don't even know how to respond back to you. Like, hi. And the other side of that is I love doing these workshops, but I cannot review your personal statement. I've had a couple of questions since doing these. If it's if outside of the field of public health and you're not applying to Rollins, I'm more than happy to have a more in-depth one-on-one conversation with you and go through it and say, like, this is what I'm hearing, things like that. But if you're applying to Rollins or a school of public health, I can't review it.
Perfect. Any other questions? I want to make sure that we're being respectful of people's times. Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brittney. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk over personal statements with these guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.